Guys, Gunna's career is insane. He is the first rapper to ever snitch and then become one of the biggest rappers in the world. And there's a lot of crazy things that we got to put into perspective in this video. Because he low-key changed the game. I don't know if it's in the most positive way, but if you're a fan of Atlanta rap, then your favorite rapper is probably looking at Gunna in disgust right now. See, Gunna and Young Thug were locked up about 2 years ago in a RICO case, which basically accused Young Thug of being the head of a criminal organization and Gunna being a part of that organization. Now, Gunna got let out of jail pretty quickly after he was put into jail by basically testifying that YSL is indeed a criminal organization that he was a part of. And since they were accusing Young Thug of being the head of YSL, by admitting that YSL is indeed a criminal organization, Gunna was basically implying that Young Thug was the head of a criminal organization. Now, if you remember about a year ago when Gunna initially got released, he was hated and despised by every single rapper. It was very similar to when Tekashi 6ix9ine was released from jail, as both him and Gunna got locked up on a RICO case. Both of them got an early release because they essentially testified. The key difference is that when Tekashi 6ix9ine was released from jail, he proudly owned up to being a snitch. He had rats in his music videos, he went on Instagram Live and basically mocked the entire game, admitting that he snitched and just flexing all his money and freedom. Basically mocking the fact that he was responsible for leaving 20 plus people locked up in jail and basically admitting that his former crew were a bunch of gang members. Now, I'm a civilian, so I'm not going to touch on the morality of snitching. It's obviously a big no-no in hip-hop. If I could defend 6ix9ine in any way, I would say that a lot of the guys he snitched on stole from him and even attempted to kidnap him at one point. Logically, you wouldn't have any remorse if you were responsible for keeping the same people that tried to kidnap you and stole from you, if you were responsible for keeping them locked up in jail. See, where 6ix9ine went wrong is he was so arrogant and disgustingly proud of the fact that he snitched on his former team. The same guys that he was rolling with for years in the beginning of his career, shouting Treyway, basically acting like he was one of them. He felt no sympathy to keep them locked up in bars and blatantly admit that they were all guilty of the crimes they were accused of. So when you couple that on top of the fact that when 6ix9ine was released from jail, he was dropping really horrible music, it was very easy for the public to turn on him and paint him as the villain. It's because he acted like one. He showed no remorse. He was proud of the fact that he snitched, and he didn't value his fans enough to try to win them back over with quality music. Instead, he just put out trash. The big difference with Gunna is, before going to jail, Gunna was loved by the entire music industry. He was Young Thug's protege, collaborated with all the massive Atlanta rappers like Lil Baby, Future, 21 Savage. It's even rumored that he wrote for Lil Baby. And you guys probably remember how legendary of a duo Gunna and Lil Baby were. Love Dates was an absolute classic track. But when he came out of jail, all these guys turned on him. He had no one on his side. And for an artist who frequently relied on collaborations to get his biggest hits, think of Yosemite by Travis, Oh Okay with Young Thug and Lil Baby, or Drip Too Hard with Lil Baby, it seems like it would be a long uphill battle for Gunna to get back at that top spot and generate the amount of hits that he was generating before he went to jail, since he had no popular rapper friends to collaborate with. But Gunna really pulled the smartest move possible by basically remaining silent about this entire thing via social media, and instead, he told his side of the story in his music. The first song he put out right when he got out of jail was called Bread and Butter, basically admitting that the plea deal he took was a mistake and that he was tricked by the district attorney. He also criticized his former collaborator Lil Baby for turning on him by alleging that Lil Baby was signed to a quote-unquote rat. Gunna's referring to P, the co-founder of the label Quality Control Music that Lil Baby is signed to. There's basically paperwork floating around that P had been involved in cooperating in a murder case back in 2010. In the song, he also emphasizes the fact that he was never put on the stand to testify against anyone else. The plea deal he took only required Gunna to admit his own guilt in the case made against him. And essentially in this song, he's basically saying that, everything's not black and white. Just because he took a plea deal didn't mean that he was snitching on anybody, and that his former collaborators didn't really understand this, and they were also hypocrites because they were still associated with people who were actual quote-unquote snitches. Now again, as a civilian, I have no productive take on the morality behind any of this. From a damage control perspective, Gunna was doing a much better job than 6ix9ine at staying silent, ignoring the hate, and addressing everything in the best way possible through his music. And it was really his music alone that made him win the public back over. He followed that song up with his album A Gift and a Curse, which spawned the #1 hit, Fuck You Mean. That was like Song of the Summer in 2023, and it was undeniable that Gunna was back. But if you needed any reassurance that Gunna was back, and not only just back, but one of the hottest rappers in the game at the time, then you didn't have to look much further than at his mentor and former co-defendant, Young Thug. See, while Gunna was putting out #1 records, Young Thug was still locked up, and he decided to release his album, Business is Business, 1 week after Gunna put out his album, A Gift and a Curse. Audio files leaked showed a jail call between Young Thug, Lil Baby, and Lil Durk. Thug was basically telling them to not show Gunna any support, and that he was going to step on Gunna's release with his own album. Now, it's really crazy that this didn't really work, though in my opinion, Young Thug did have the better album, because in the long run, Gunna's album sold a lot more than Young Thug's did. And before the two went to jail, Thug was the much bigger artist than Gunna. It would be like if Drake and Party Next Door both got locked up, Party Next Door snitches on Drake, comes out, releases an album, and then a week later Drake releases an album, but Party Next Door's album sells much more than Drake's does. It was a weird change in the trajectory of Atlanta hip-hop, and it showed that people didn't care that the entire industry turned on Gunna, or that the person who brought him in the game, Young Thug, did not approve of his actions. All that mattered was that Gunna was putting out hits. And with his popularity rising, we saw certain rappers feel comfortable being associated with Gunna again. We got collaborations from him and Offset, him and Roddy Ricch, who were both fans and friends of Young Thug before he went to jail. And while Gunna became the hottest rapper in Atlanta, his former collaborator, Lil Baby, who was a lot bigger than Gunna for most of both of their careers, was now considered to be falling off. I could do a separate video on that. If you've been keeping up with Lil Baby's career, then you know that he was at the top of the game in around 2020, has been struggling to recreate that moment or even generate any decent hits in recent memory. We recently clicked up with UK rapper Central C, and the two made a hit together, but excess of that song could just be attributed to TikTok. Regardless, we haven't seen a Lil Baby solo hit in years. While Gunna completely took his place as the hottest trap Atlanta rapper in the game and has given us multiple hits since he got out of jail. And it's interesting because Gunna did this with no resources, right? A lot of his former collaborators, rappers, producers, no one wanted to work with him when he got out. We've heard Lil Durk diss him on record, haven't heard him link up with former producers that he used to work with like Weezy or Metro Boomin. Like, he was stuck with everyone hating on him. He had no one to rely on for collaborations, no producers to lace him with hot beats. He was the absolute underdog. Meanwhile, Lil Baby was at the top of the game. He had everyone gassed for his sophomore album. He had features with all the biggest rappers from Drake to Future, J. Cole. He was set up for success. Meanwhile, Gunna was set up for failure. And the exact opposite happened. Gunna did everything all by himself, produced hits by himself, put out successful albums, sold out his shows. Meanwhile, Lil Baby's album didn't perform nearly as well as his previous one did, and he hasn't had a real hit in about 2 years. He had to cancel his tour due to low ticket sales. Safe to say that Gunna lapped him and became the top rapper in Atlanta, aside from maybe Future or 21 Savage. After the release of 6ix9ine, the world kind of turned on him for embracing the fact that he was a snitch. The exact opposite happened to Gunna. He became more popular after quote-unquote snitching. And I think this just shows that people just want good music. Music will speak for itself. When it came out, he didn't say a word. He was remorseful, spoke about the issues candidly in his music. He just gave the people what they wanted to hear. He stayed out the way, he minded his business, and he didn't have to do anything to win the public over except for release hits. It's interesting because Gunna recently put on his first show back in Atlanta, his hometown, and he waited this long to perform in Atlanta because for a while, people thought that he wouldn't be embraced by Atlanta if he tried to make that comeback there. There's footage of people booing a DJ at a club in Atlanta for playing Gunna, and it's Young Thug's hometown, and everyone basically considered that Gunna turned on Young Thug by quote-unquote snitching on him, and Young Thug basically despised Gunna. So if you were a fan of Young Thug, or if you were from Atlanta, and you considered Gunna slightly responsible for keeping Young Thug behind bars, then it's safe to say that you probably weren't the biggest fan of Gunna. It was actually the exact opposite. See, Gunna put on a show again recently in Atlanta for the first time in years, and it sold out. It was an absolute hit. The crowd was packed. It was loud. The craziest part of all is Young Thug's dad was in the front row of that concert, basically confusing the world on whether or not Thug and Gunna were still cool. See, again, we heard audio proof of Young Thug telling Lil Baby and Lil Durk that he disapproved of what Gunna did, that he wanted to sabotage Gunna's album release. And we've never really publicly ever seen Young Thug's dad before he makes his first appearance at Gunna's concert. But again, beyond this confusing back and forth between Thug and Gunna, and whether or not they're on good terms, it's safe to say that Gunna right now is one of the hottest rappers in Atlanta, selling out shows and dropping 2 #1 albums since he's been released from jail just a year ago. And I'm not here to question the morality of quote-unquote snitching, or if Gunna actually did technically snitch. Again, I'm a civilian, but it does mark a very interesting turn in the sentiment of hip-hop listeners, because this same situation just a couple years prior with 6ix9ine showed us that hip-hop did not necessarily embrace quote-unquote snitches. So why has that only made Gunna a bigger rapper? Well, this is a hot take, and I could be wrong, but I think people are just tired of the gang music we've been getting from a lot of rappers lately. See, the 2020s marked the rise of guys like King Von, Pooh Shiesty, Lil Durk, NBA Youngboy, the list goes on. All these guys kind of rapped about the same thing. A lot of their music was very dark with themes of violence, which is cool, but for most of them, it seemed like there was a lack of evolution or innovation or change within their music. Again, with guys like Lil Baby, it was hard for him to catch another hit after his monstrous run in 2020 because a lot of his music just started to sound the same and started to sound stale. It's the same situation with NBA Youngboy. And I think that if Durk doesn't change something on his next album, the same thing might happen to him. On the flip side, you got guys like Pooh Shiesty, 42 Doug, who are gangster rappers and kind of brought something new to the game, but due to actually leading the lifestyle they were talking about in their music, it's left them behind bars. Same with Youngboy, and unfortunately for guys like King Von, who are incredible artists, that lifestyle they lived led them to even worse places like being deceased. So with this uprising of gang-related subject matter being very prevalent in the early 2020s in hip-hop music, we've seen a trend of a lot of the leading artists in that subgenre either end up dead, in jail, or finding themselves in a situation where their subject matter or music in general just kind of becomes stale. Meanwhile, Gunna, whose persona is flawed in the eyes of a lot of rappers in the game, has kept elevating his sound and subject matter and hit-making abilities to bring something new to the table and distract the general public from the controversies that he was roped into. So all in all, with guys like Kendrick winning this beef with Drake, showing that people still value lyricism and want to hear more bar-focused music, and seeing guys like Gunna dominate the charts with way less to work with than guys like Lil Baby or Lil Durk, it shows that at the end of the day, only real music is going to last, and good music will win you back the love from the public no matter what. But what do you guys think? Do you think we're experiencing a shift within hip-hop right now? Has Gunna taken the crown as the hottest rap artist in the game right now? Does it matter if your favorite rapper is a so-called snitch? Let me know in the comments. Drop a like if you like this video, subscribe for more, and I will catch you guys in the next one. What's your favorite Gunna album? To me, it has to be DS3, easily. I think his most recent one was kind of disappointing, but it's still way better than anything we've heard from Lil Baby recently. But that's not saying much, and maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments.